Hi, this is Colin from the History Pilgrim. In the aftermath of the Second World War, London was a once proud city brought to its knees with the world's largest collection of Victorian architecture, churches from the 1600s, and industrial districts reduced to mere rubble. Following the surrender of Germany, a new task was addressed by the British government, which was to rebuild a city in ruins. After World War II, London became possibly the most multicultural and important city on Earth. One might wonder how London got this way. To find out what factors led to London becoming the global center of commerce and culture it is today, one needs to examine how World War II led to London rising like a phoenix from its post-war ashes. London, which began as a Roman settlement on the River Thames, served as the home of the British Crown and was one of Europe's largest cities. Events such as the bubonic plague and the Great Fire of London led to deaths and the restructuring of the Grand City. The city saw its triumphs and failures. Perhaps the greatest period of growth of London came with the Industrial Revolution. For much of European history, Paris was the largest city on the European continent, with Paris more than double the size of London in the early 1300s. Change was in the tides, with much of Paris crowded and confined to a small area. The French Revolution would see the building of the wide boulevards and parks that we now associate with Paris. Britain's island location led to London having a unique benefit over other European capitals: naval superiority. When traveling to London, a monument in Trafalgar Square, Nelson's Column, celebrates Britain's superiority on the high seas, with Commander Horatio Nelson's defeat of the combined Spanish and French navies. Britain's naval strength allowed it to become the empire on which the sun never set. The entire Indian subcontinent, Jamaica, Canada, Egypt, Ireland, Hong Kong, China, Australia, and many other locations were quickly captured by the British Empire. It wasn't until 1997 that the last colony of the British Empire, Hong Kong, was returned by the British to the Chinese government. As a result of massive colonization, Britain had a surplus of raw materials ranging from Indian spices to Canadian lumber to Jamaican coffee. The United Kingdom is a small island only 400 miles from top to bottom, which is remarkable and goes to show what having an extremely strong naval presence does to administer colonies and the flow of materials globally. At the turn of the 20th century, 1/4 of the Earth's surface was ruled over by the Union Jack. The rainy climate of England made England's top products, from tea to chocolate to textiles, supplied by colonial imports rather than home resources. With supplies of untapped coal on British soil, the Industrial Revolution brought an unseen, almost magical level of growth to London. With the invention of the steam engine, which allowed coal to be used for industrial growth, London and other British cities transformed into centers of manufacturing. The embrace of factories led to the exodus of British citizens from small villages to cities and towns. Under the reign of Queen Victoria, the population of London skyrocketed, going from a population of 1 to 3 million in a single human lifespan. This was the largest period of growth to ever be seen in a European city. Such a massive urban population ushered in an era of smokestacks, heavy industrialization, and overcrowding, which perhaps resembles where China's population growth is today. This gave London dominance over other European cities due to the fact it began to grow exponentially much earlier than other European capitals such as Paris or Rome, which were still based around farmers and artisans. Writers like Dickens explored themes of worker exploitation and social inequality in his literature scene during Victorian era in London. In the East End of London, gin production soared, fueling an epidemic of poverty, crime, and prostitution. It wasn't uncommon for several families to be living in the same small one-room flat in the East End during this era. Such high population density led to deaths due to unclean air and feces being everywhere, often contaminating drinking water. This led to the creation of a modern sewer system. With the advent of electricity, the have and have-nots in British society did not change much. It would take World War II to lead to demographic shifts in inner-city London. With the fall of France by Nazi Germany, it became apparent that England, a mere 20 miles away at its narrowest point across the Channel, would be the next country to fall to the Third Reich. One thing was standing in the way of Hitler and his high military commanders for knocking England out of the war: the English Channel, which was controlled by the most powerful navy on Earth. In order to force England into a surrender, German military strategy needed to rely on blitzkrieg, a tactic which translates in German to lightning war. With the mass production of German aircraft, Hitler focused his efforts on bombing the British into submission. In 1941, the Blitz commenced, initially only targeting military targets. Hitler quickly changed focus to bombing civilian targets in London. Nightly blackouts to confuse German pilots and air raid sirens became a regular occurrence. Perhaps in times of sheer horror that often accompanies war, people let social standing in their country go, as both rich and poor citizens of London were at risk of being killed, while German submarines were sinking ships carrying British supplies from its overseas colonies, which were the main food source of the British populace leading up to the war. The people of England were at risk of starving to death. This led to the focus on victory gardens to increase surplus of food during the period of rationing. During the worst days of the Blitz, the bombs fell nearly nightly, causing areas of London to be bombed to oblivion. The churches from the 1600s, which were all rebuilt in stone following the Great Fire of London, which destroyed much of the city 3 centuries earlier, were one of the greatest losses of architecture in history. Other sites such as the Queen Hall, many Victorian mansions, guild halls, and the Crystal Palace from the World's Exhibition were obliterated in the Blitz. The East End in particular saw very extreme levels of destruction. In the worst days of the Blitz, children were being evacuated to the British countryside by the Volunteer Home Guard. Life continued in the underground, with the very deep train tunnels underneath London protecting human lives from bombs overhead. The phrase seen on the London Underground to this day, "keep calm and carry on," originates to this era. The stern resolve for Britain to not surrender, even when so many people were being killed, and resistance seemed futile, by Prime Minister Winston Churchill, as well as London being the main focus of bombing raids, led to Britain winning the Battle of Britain. As Germany put all of their eggs in one basket, with even Hitler himself underestimating the sheer morale of the British people, led to the British Royal Air Force being able to outproduce Germany. After one all-out attack on London, Germany made the decision to postpone the proposed invasion of the United Kingdom. It would later be the British who several years later, along with their American and Canadian allies, would invade Nazi-occupied France through the Normandy coast. During the last few months of World War II, Nazi Germany was beginning to crumble. The British Royal Air Force, alongside the American Air Force, made the joint decision to shatter Germany with bombs. Dresden in particular, which contained the most stunning collection of Baroque architecture in the world, which was often referred to as the Florence on the Elbe, was in a single night bombed into non-existence. To this day considered one of the most troubling military decisions in history, the British and American military high commands gave orders to bomb the neutral city, with next to no military importance. In a single night, over 50,000 people were killed. After the fall of Berlin and the surrender of Germany, the United Kingdom would begin a long path of healing. By the end of World War II, more than 1/3 of the London streets were impassable due to rubble. Food was in short supply, with rationing in place until 1957, and tens of thousands were dead or crippled, significantly reducing the workforce. A solution would be coming to the United Kingdom from the other side of the world. Meanwhile, India was starving to death due to British wartime policy. The massive famines had been raging in the subcontinent for years, with one incident seeing British colonial police firing on and killing over 25,000 peaceful protesters in India. To increase the population in London, British Parliament passed immigration laws to allow citizens from Commonwealth British nations such as Jamaica, Pakistan, and India to assist in rebuilding London. The East End was a highly crowded residential district which was shattered to virtually nothing. The task would begin on rebirth of this area of the city. Due to such a reduction in living space in London, with the entire city now one big construction zone, London would receive a facelift. Parks were built where living and industrial zones formerly were. Cobbled streets and rows of several-story crowded tenements were replaced with open boulevards and expensive housing. The increase in car ownership, with the British occupation zone in control of the formerly Nazi-owned Volkswagen factory, led to availability of cars. Access to automobiles for many led to the hollowing out of urban working-class residents from city proper to suburban counties of London. Sites such as St. Paul's Cathedral and the Houses of Parliament were lucky to not be completely destroyed. However, restoration work would repair both structures to their former glory. Many artifacts on display in the British Museum were stored deep in tunnels of the London Underground to protect these priceless relics. Due to so many buildings that were destroyed in the Blitz, preservation laws were passed following the end of World War II to protect older buildings in the city from being demolished. London could have chosen to embrace the skyscraper like New York City, although it would not be decades until a single building surpassed the height of the Houses of Parliament. Part of the reason for local opposition for skyscraper construction was to protect the views of the few remaining cultural sites, in addition to keeping costs of living in London extremely high, with most of the citizens after World War II slowly forced into moving into quickly expanding suburbs. London would begin its period of renewal. Very strict rules would continue to shape urban growth in London, with virtually nothing in the city for decades being built much taller than 12 stories. Unlike in cities in the US, neighborhoods with very huge and expensive houses were built in many areas of the city, ensuring only the extremely rich could afford to live in the city proper. Following the rise in global air travel, wealthy Americans played a role in rebuilding the city. For decades, nearly everywhere in London breathed the character of the England seen in literary classics. Without the communist occupation seen in Berlin, London invested heavily in rebuilding the city to be as beautiful as possible to visitors. Open parks, Tudor-style houses, and rebuilt churches cleverly hid the fact that much of the architecture was rebuilt in mock medieval or Victorian style. Mock medieval style was popular before World War II, with both the Houses of Parliament and Tower Bridge looking medieval but being built in the 1800s to blend in with the surrounding architecture. In the aftermath of World War II, St. Paul's Cathedral was rebuilt largely from donated money by volunteers. It would not be until 1962 that the structure was fully rebuilt to its pre-war glory. A section of the cathedral has stained glass with an image of George Washington and an Apollo rocket for those seeking to find it. It pays homage to the American airmen who gave their lives in the wartime defense during the Battle of Britain in World War II. Both Big Ben's Dial and the House of Commons Hall were destroyed and subsequently rebuilt after war. Although perhaps due to its massive size, the tower itself remained largely standing during the war. In conclusion, the Blitz, while incredibly horrific, helped boost British morale and ultimately shape London into the multicultural metropolis with a diverse array of different architectural styles contained within its crowded streets for tourists to enjoy. While visiting London, be sure to appreciate older buildings in the city, as they are gems in a sea of modern, largely rebuilt neighborhoods ravaged by war. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'd like to hear your comments. Please subscribe for more history videos. Sincerely, the History Pilgrim.